Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. In this discussion, Enrica Perucchietti and Roberto Quaglia explore The Truman Show not merely as a film, but as a powerful allegorical lens through which to interpret contemporary reality, moving between cinema, philosophy, media dynamics, and social behavior. They examine how late 1990s films anticipated a growing sense of disconnection from reality, the mechanisms through which dominant narratives are maintained, and the subtle processes that shape both belief and dissent. What emerges is a layered reflection on perception, control, and awakening, one that blurs the line between fiction and the world we inhabit. Enrica Perucchietti opens the discussion by drawing attention to what she considers far more than a mere cinematic coincidence. Within a short span of time, a series of films were released, all united by the same underlying theme, the unreality of the world we inhabit. Titles such as The Truman Show, Dark City, The 13th Floor, Existence, and finally The Matrix seem to orbit around the same radical philosophical question. What if the reality we perceive were an artificial construct? A stage set designed by someone with the precise intention of keeping us unaware of the truth? Perucchietti emphasizes how this phenomenon clusters in the years immediately preceding what Roberto Quaglia defines as the ontological earthquake of September 11, 2001, a symbolic and perceptual rupture destined to permanently reshape the collective imagination and the relationship between citizens and official narratives. Roberto Quaglia takes up this observation and develops it further, while making an important distinction from the outset. Recognizing this coincidence does not mean claiming that all the films of that period were produced as part of a conscious, organized conspiracy, nor that individual directors or screenwriters were working within a unified plan. The argument is more nuanced and, in his view, more compelling. At that particular cultural moment, the production system itself appears to have favored a certain kind of cinema. Quaglia suspects that behind some of these choices there may lie the influence of what he calls the military sociologists of the Pentagon, structures connected to U.S. institutional apparatuses that, in documented and acknowledged ways, maintain relationships with the Hollywood film industry. If such influence exists, it would not necessarily manifest as direct orders to filmmakers, but rather operate at a higher level, in the phase where decisions are made about which projects deserve funding and distribution and which do not. What remains undeniably worthy of reflection, the two interlocutors continue, is that these films seem to have anticipated, and in some measure shaped, the interpretive frameworks through which a growing portion of the population would later attempt to make sense of the events of the following years. The Truman Show thus emerges as the archetypal film of this cinematic season, not only for its intrinsic quality, unanimously appreciated by both, but for the extraordinary precision with which its allegory overlaps with the social, media, and psychological dynamics that would unfold over the next 2 decades. The Truman Show, directed by Peter Weir and starring Jim Carrey in the lead role, supported by a high-caliber cast including Laura Linney, Ed Harris, and Natasha McElhone, tells the story of Truman Burbank, a man in his early 30s who appears outwardly content, sociable, and satisfied with his life in a quiet, orderly small community. What Truman completely ignores is that his entire existence is the most successful television show in history, broadcast live worldwide 24 hours a day since the moment of his birth. Truman was selected even before he was born. Taken from an unwanted pregnancy, he was adopted not by a family, but by an entire television network, which constructed around him a wholly artificial world. The town in which he lives, Sea Haven, is a gigantic television set enclosed within an enormous dome. The sea that surrounds it is a controlled body of water. The sky, clouds, sun, and moon are all stage elements managed by technicians. Even storms and clear skies are carefully programmed. Every person Truman encounters in his life, from his wife to his childhood friends, from his co-workers to passers-by, is a professional actor following the director's instructions. At the top of this system stands Christoph, played by Ed Harris, the demiurgic director and absolute puppeteer of the show. Christoph operates from outside the dome, in a kind of elevated control room that visually evokes the image of a god observing and governing his creation from above. He determines every aspect of Truman's existence, the relationships offered to him, the obstacles he encounters, the directions in which he is pushed or restrained. Perucchietti underscores the fundamental importance of this figure within the film's allegorical structure, while Quaglia highlights its resonance with the Gnostic philosophical tradition. Christoph is not merely a narrative antagonist, but embodies the figure of the Archon, the demiurge who keeps the human being imprisoned within an illusory reality, preventing access to a deeper, liberating knowledge. When asked by a journalist, in an interview that appears as an inset within the film itself, how it is possible that Truman has never questioned the nature of his world, Christoph replies with what Quaglia considers the key to interpreting the entire film. Human beings tend to accept the world as it is presented to them. It is a response that, Quaglia observes, does not merely describe the condition of a fictional character. It captures a profound anthropological constant, a mechanism of uncritical adherence to perceived reality that transcends epochs and cultures. Perucchietti then reconstructs the film's production history, which proves to be more complex and layered than the final version on screen might suggest. The screenplay was written by Andrew Niccol, a screenwriter and director who would later gain widespread recognition with Gattaca, another dystopian masterpiece that shares numerous thematic and structural elements with The Truman Show. Niccol initially developed a short original treatment titled The Malcolm, in which the story was framed in a far darker, more unsettling tone, devoid of the comedic inflections that characterized the final version. Its atmosphere was closer to that of Gattaca, austere, relentless, with an undercurrent of existential despair that never fully resolves. Producer Scott Rudin purchased the screenplay for over $1 million, recognizing both its commercial and artistic potential. Paramount Pictures agreed to distribute the film with a substantial budget, on the condition that Niccol, still considered too inexperienced and lacking the necessary visibility, would not direct it. What followed was a long phase of director selection, involving some of the most prominent names in the film industry: Tim Burton, Steven Spielberg, Terry Gilliam, and Bryan Singer. Each of these filmmakers could have given the project a radically different identity, and Perucchietti suggests that imagining a Burton or Gilliam-style version of The Truman Show is an intriguing exercise in itself. In the end, the choice fell on Peter Weir, an Australian director with a refined and somewhat eclectic filmography. Once on board, Weir imposed a very precise vision, which entailed a profound revision of the written material. The screenplay was rewritten no fewer than 16 times, with Niccol gradually softening the darker tones, removing elements of excessive narrative bleakness, and making the story accessible to a wide audience without betraying its philosophical core. The result is what Quaglia, not without admiration, defines as phantapsychology, not science fiction in the traditional sense, but an exploration of the deep mechanisms of perception and self-deception, set within a recognizable present. Weir was also determined, at all costs, to cast Jim Carrey in the role of Truman, and he patiently waited for the actor to become available, tied up as he was with other film commitments. The choice appeared bold, even risky. At the time, Carrey was known to the general public almost exclusively for his grotesque, surreal comedies. Quaglia, while considering the decision artistically brilliant, identifies an ideological side effect. Carrey's face, so deeply associated with comedy in the collective imagination, unconsciously amplifies the sense of distance between the film's allegory and the reality it alludes to. The viewer instinctively feels, without necessarily articulating it, that their own world cannot resemble Truman's, because Truman is Jim Carrey, and Jim Carrey belongs to the realm of the improbable and the grotesque. According to Quaglia, this mechanism is one of the ways in which the film, even unintentionally, performs its function of framing itself as fiction. Another aspect that Perucchietti believes has been underestimated by critics is the film's structural debt to the work of Philip Dick, one of the most visionary and philosophically rich science fiction writers of the 20th century. In particular, she points to the similarities between The Truman Show and the novel Time Out of Joint, one of Dick's lesser-cited masterpieces, yet perhaps among his most prophetic. Quaglia, while noting that his reading of Dick dates back several decades and acknowledging Perucchietti as the more up-to-date source on the subject, agrees with the relevance of the comparison. In Dick's novel, the protagonist Raggle Gum lives in an apparently idyllic community, set in a kind of reassuring, conformist 1950s America. Gum spends his days solving a daily puzzle published in a local newspaper, which consists of identifying the location of a small green light. What he does not realize is that this game is anything but innocent. It is the mechanism through which authorities exploit his extraordinary ability to pinpoint the impact locations of enemy missiles in an ongoing interplanetary war. The peaceful world he believes he inhabits is, in fact, an artificial construct designed to keep him in a state of compliant unawareness. The parallel with Truman is evident. Both protagonists live in a fabricated reality styled after the 1950s. Both are unaware of being instruments in the service of a system that uses them without their consent. And in both cases, awakening begins with small perceptual anomalies. What distinguishes the film from the novel, Quaglia observes, is the direction in which the material is pushed in its cinematic adaptation. The film removes the more overtly science fiction elements present in the book, interplanetary wars and futuristic scenarios, and replaces them with a more immediate and universal psychodynamic construction. Paradoxically, this makes the film more powerful in its impact on contemporary audiences, precisely because the allegory has been stripped of anything that might make it feel distant or exotic. Perucchietti identifies a further shared element that reinforces the Dickian reading. Both Gum and Truman, despite appearing satisfied with their lives, actually exhibit a deep sense of dissatisfaction, a subtle but persistent existential boredom that signals the gap between the life they are living and the one they could or would like to live. It is as if a part of them knows, at a preconscious level, that the reality surrounding them is not authentic, and that their existence is confined within boundaries artificially drawn by others. One of the most analytically fertile aspects explored by Perucchietti and Quaglia is the mechanism through which the system built around Truman reacts whenever the protagonist begins to develop doubts about the nature of his world. Truman's awakening does not occur suddenly or linearly. Rather, it unfolds through accumulation, via a series of small anomalous events that cannot be explained within the framework of the reality he has been given. A stage light falls just a few steps away from him. By accidentally tuning into the studio's radio frequencies, he hears the control room issuing instructions to the actors. The boat with which he attempts to leave the island mysteriously refuses to set sail. A man who bears a striking resemblance to his supposedly deceased father briefly reappears, only to be hastily removed by the cast. With each new crack in the system, the The machinery of counter-narrative springs into action with almost automatic precision. The news broadcast promptly provides alternative explanations for every anomaly. An extraordinary storm accounts for the failed boat journey. A wave of wandering vagrants is invoked to explain the presence of the man resembling his father. The entire internal media apparatus of the show serves a single purpose: to produce substitute narratives that overlay the anomalies perceived by Truman, normalizing them and restoring them to the order of official reality. These explanations do not need to be fully convincing. It is enough that they exist, that they offer a cognitive escape route for those unwilling or unable to bear the weight of doubt. Quaglia recognizes in this pattern a striking, almost mirror-like correspondence with dynamics observable in the real world. He points, for example, to the increase in sudden deaths recorded in recent years, a phenomenon that has fueled growing questions within parts of public opinion. With each new wave of suspicion and inquiry, there is a corresponding emergence of articles, news reports, and expert statements offering the most varied, and at times frankly implausible, explanations: pizza as a cause of cardiac arrest, excessive sleep as a risk factor, daylight saving time as a potential trigger for cardiovascular events, even sexual activity cited as a possible cause of sudden death among young people. Perucchietti confirms having encountered such reports, and the two readily agree that this reflects the very same narrative structure at work in The Truman Show. A media system mobilized to normalize anomalies, to reabsorb them into an acceptable framework of meaning, and to neutralize doubt before it can consolidate into deeper questioning. Within this same logic, they also place the growing number of incidents involving buses, airplanes, and other means of transport whose operators have suffered sudden medical episodes with serious consequences. Events that were once extremely rare, but now appear to have multiplied. In these cases as well, the two interlocutors observe, the media response follows the same script: generic medical explanations, institutional reassurances, and above all the effort to attribute the phenomenon to pre-existing and familiar causes, thereby removing it from the attention of those who might be inclined to ask more uncomfortable questions. Perucchietti and Quaglia devote a substantial part of their analysis to the mechanism through which anyone who begins to question the dominant narrative is treated in much the same way as Truman when his wife, friends, and colleagues surround him with excessive concern and reassuring explanations, attempting to pull him back into the normality of the show. In contemporary reality, this process of reintegration operates through a specific tool: the application of stigmatizing labels. Quaglia reflects on the nature of these labels, describing them as magic words, in the sense that they have been progressively emptied of precise semantic content and reduced to mere instruments of discredit. Terms such as conspiracy theorist, anti-vaxxer, far-right extremist, xenophobe are deployed against those who deviate from the official narrative not as analytical descriptions, but as anathemas, in the technical and historical sense of the term, exclusions from the community of the faithful, judgments that require neither proof nor debate. Quaglia explicitly draws a parallel with the practices of heresy and the Inquisition. The mechanism is identical, only the vocabulary has changed. Since the word heretic has, over the centuries, lost its evocative and intimidating power, it has become necessary to invent new terms, equally effective in producing social exclusion and automatic discredit. The case of Elon Musk is discussed by both as a paradigmatic and particularly illuminating example of this mechanism, also due to his visibility and the speed with which the narrative surrounding him shifted. For years, Musk had been constructed and celebrated by the same media as a visionary genius, a technological pioneer worthy of near mythological admiration. The moment he began publicly expressing critical positions toward dominant narratives, particularly regarding COVID-19 vaccines and the management of the pandemic, the counter-narrative machinery activated with a speed and uniformity that, as Perucchietti observes, are themselves revealing. Musk was progressively recast as an embodiment of all available epithets: xenophobe, conspiracy theorist, far-right extremist, supporter of dangerous movements. Perucchietti notes how this transformation occurred in a nearly synchronized manner across different outlets and platforms, with a consistency that is difficult to explain through mere editorial spontaneity. Quaglia highlights an additional aspect. These epithets are interchangeable and cumulative. They do not exclude one another, nor do they follow any internal semantic logic. They are simply layered and redeployed as needed, depending on the context. With a touch of irony, Quaglia imagines that within the halls of media power there may exist actual designers of anathemas, professional figures tasked with studying and testing new forms of stigmatization whenever previous ones become worn out through overuse or lose their intimidating effectiveness. When conspiracy theorist has exhausted its force, when it is reclaimed with pride by those it targets and no longer instills fear, something new will have to be devised. Returning to the film itself, Perucchietti offers a sociological reading of the distinction that the Truman Show stages between those who believe in the show and those who have unmasked it. The population, she suggests, can be broadly divided into two categories that mirror the film's narrative structure. On one side, the Trumans still immersed in the show, those who accept the world as it is presented to them and feel no need to question its nature. On the other, the Trumans who have undergone a process of awakening, who have identified the cracks in the system and can no longer ignore them. The transition from one condition to the other is almost always triggered by small personal events, perceptual anomalies that vary according to individual sensitivity, life experience, and concrete circumstances. There is no single universal moment of illumination. Each person has their own stage light falling at their feet. The pandemic, Perucchietti observes, represented for many people a turning point that is difficult to reverse. Faced with concrete and personal consequences, and with contradictions that could no longer go unnoticed, many individuals who had previously lived comfortably within the comfort zone of the dominant narrative found themselves compelled to step outside of it. This awakening is neither painless nor without consequences. Those who undergo it are immediately exposed to the system's reaction, which tends, exactly as in Truman's case, to treat them as unstable, paranoid, unreliable. Truman's wife, friends, and colleagues all begin to look at him with growing concern the moment he starts asking questions. It is the same gaze that, in contemporary reality, is directed at those who publicly raise doubts. Quaglia, however, points to a subtle and almost inescapable trap that deserves final reflection. When those who have undergone this awakening attempt to find a language to describe their experience, to communicate it and share it, they inevitably end up drawing on the very allegories constructed by Hollywood. They speak of the Matrix. They speak of the Truman Show. They speak of shows within shows. In other words, they use the images and metaphors that the system itself has produced and disseminated. This, Quaglia argues, suggests that whoever designed and manages the system has also appropriated the narrative of dissent. Even those who reject the fiction are forced to describe it using the words and images provided by that same fiction, moving along semantic paths already traced by others, within a pre-delimited conceptual territory. This is not merely a philosophical observation. It carries practical implications for anyone attempting to build a radical critique of the dominant narrative system. The Truman Show thus remains, in the analysis proposed by Perucchietti and Quaglia, far more than a brilliant work of phantapsychology. It is a prophetic mirror, an allegorical map constructed with extraordinary precision, anticipating social, media, and psychological dynamics that would unfold with increasing intensity in the years following its release. The very fact that this film is invoked to describe the present, that its images and characters have become tools for interpreting contemporary reality, retrospectively confirms its visionary scope, whatever chain of causes led to its creation. And at the same time, as Quaglia lucidly concludes, this very use of the film as a key to understanding reality is already, in some sense, proof of how extraordinarily difficult it is to fully escape the Matrix. We don't get out alive, as he puts it, with the ironic awareness of someone who has learned to recognize the cage without ever completely managing to break free from it. That's all for today. See you in the next episode of Hollywoodism, Movies and Propaganda, here on Compelling Topics.
I went to a few